Hello everyone and welcome back to another Strategoi video. Today we'll be doing another tournament report, this time for the German Team Championships. I guess I wrote GTC Teams here, but the GTC is, the Teams is implicit in the GTC, so it's a bit redundant, but not for those that don't know what GTC stands for. This is actually my second time doing it. Last year they had a four-man version of it, or four-person version of it, and Nick wasn't there. But fortunately, Nick, who's on the other end of the line here, got to participate this year as well, and it was an eight-person teams tournament, which is kind of better training for Worlds. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Good. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me back, Ryan.
Of course. I don't even know if it's having you back at this point. I think you're just, whether it's been officially stated as such or not, I feel like you're basically just a co-host. So,
Those guys that never leaves, eh?
yeah, and we'll be, Jonas and I had the Discord is aware, we got together. He came to visit Amsterdam for a couple nights here this past week, and Nick got to drop by and have. Did we do dinner together? Yeah, we did dinner together. Duh. That was great. You were definitely ready. I think you caught Jonas a bit unaware with how ready to be done with work you were for the day.
Yes, I was definitely over it and looking forward to having some fun. So that made some pretty exhausting commentary during your games.
I didn't mind, but I don't. Oh, all right. I just got a notification there. I'll have Jonas cut that out. Okay. So anyway, we are going to be covering this tournament as usual, but since it's it's another GT essentially, even though it's an 8-man tournament, which we're going to be spending some extra time covering how it works with teams in general, and then we're going to be moving on to the normal matchups and everything instead of talking about the event, so we can also save some time here. So again, tournament review, army list, matchups, all the good stuff. Looking at what we have here, we'll be talking about teams and then the meta and then the experience in general. So looking at teams, Nick, I feel like your input here is particularly valuable because you pay attention more to the pairing system than I do. I get kind of overwhelmed with pairing, but let's first cover what the list building portion of preparing for a teams event is like. So obviously you were here at this tournament. Training for the Dutch team, the Worlds team, and I was kind of a mercenary once again, but this time with a very friendly German club that's just there to kind of, have a good time, I think. Maybe a little less competitive implicitly. But so in the team list building kind of sense here, for those that don't know, no matter how many team members you have, it usually works where you can't repeat factions, so armies, and you can't repeat models, say allies or an incarnate or endless spells. And then many of your universal options, things like Master of Magic, Arcane Tome, before the nerf, and other things like spells and stuff. Nick, do you remember what we could repeat at this tournament? I think we could do some amount of aspects of the champion. Maybe 3? Was it 2 or 3?
Yeah, they were following the normal standard now, which is 3 per team.
Okay, but most everything else we couldn't repeat, right? Grand strategies, I think we could take 2 of, maybe?
Right.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why you need to double up on those is because there just aren't enough aspects of the champion to go around if you have 8 people in a team. And then grand strategies, kind of similar story. As anyone that's following along with the updates to book grand strategies, so army specific ones, a lot of them are very dependent on your build, and just because you got 3-4 extra grand strategies doesn't necessarily mean that's enough for, especially an 8-person team, to have a good enough option for each person. I myself was kind of forced down the defend what's ours route, and that isn't exactly ideal. So sometimes when you have these restrictions of overlapping universal traits or other choices you have to make for your army, it can end up being kind of restrictive. With your team, Nick, did you guys feel like you were really struggling with who got what?
No, not particularly. We had some discussions about the aspects for a while of who would be best suited for it, but I would say that was probably the hardest part of like sorting it out. Based on our composition, it was pretty logical where the spells and things, or the end the spells were going to go and all that. So we really didn't have too much overlap.
Yeah, and I know your grand strategy was one from your book.
Right.
Did you? Was anyone on the team kind of arguing over a grand strategy, or was it?
No,
Yeah.
no,
Okay.
we really didn't have any issues there either.
Yeah. Good.
For any things that popped up, we had a pretty good backup. Like in most cases, like if there was a double grand strategy, someone's like, "Oh, I can easily take this one," though. So it really wasn't too
Right.
painful of a building process.
Okay. And yeah, as I mentioned here, due to the pairing system, it's best to find an optimal balance of army roles. And we kind of, Jonas and I have been talking about making some more list building videos. If you haven't seen the last one, about focusing, one video at least is focusing on different types of army roles for units within your army. So sort of micro version of this, which would be like hammers and anvils. But you could also look at this on a macro level as well, with armies on a team. So, Nick, we've got things like alpha, melee armies, shooting armies, magic armies. Can you think of some other kind of archetypes that you need to have a balanced team?
Yeah, so maybe even a little bit higher level than that is first you got to have your defenders. So I don't know if you're going to go through how the pairing system actually works, but basically for the defenders you need an army that really has a good matchup against almost everything, so that you're very safe with whatever your opponent is going to try and make you pair against. So that's pretty much your foundation, your building blocks. And a good example of a defender is like a Zinch army. So they're going to have a wide range of positive matchups, or at least mitigating matchups. Your typical just wound pit armies that can just soak are usually good choices for defenders. And then when you start looking at the type of attackers, yeah, exactly to your point, you want to have a variety that you can potentially throw counters around for whatever your opponents are throwing down for defenders. And that really requires you to have a well-rounded roster, whereas you can't have too many armies that are niche. Like, for example, when you're focusing in on a certain build, like I want to be an Alpha Strike. Well, okay, but can you survive if you don't get the perfect matchups? And that's something you really have to take a look at and balance that out. It's okay in your roster to take a couple risks there, like if you have a specialist army, for example, and you reserve that for that perfect moment. And these are really the armies that are going to try and bring home those 20-0 wins, which can make a huge difference in your overall scores. But for the most part, you have to have a really nice balance, leaning heavier to the more stable wins armies.
Wait, that's an interesting point, because we often talk about teams tournaments in a sense where you, as an individual person on that team, you have a little more freedom to make a wacky army that can kind of lean into certain synergies more than you would if you had to take on all comers at a normal singles tournament. But what you just said, of course, is kind of counter to that. Not that you're contradicting yourself, but I agree with you. It's an interesting balance, because you do also need to be able to, at least, even if you lose, not lose too hard, right? And maybe that's kind of your point there. Where do you think that balance lies when we talk about that? You can lean into armies that are a little more skewed in a teams tournament that you wouldn't be able to in a singles.
Yeah, so in a singles, you really have to be well run, because you don't know what you're going to get, and it's random. And then you need to have some sort of plan for everything. Whereas when we start talking about these 8-man tournaments, you have to put more thought into not just potential matchups, but also your battle plans that you're going to get, and what is your functional role within the team that you can center your pairings around. So if we just think of a traditional Alpha Strike army, or like, you take the new KO, like that's going to be their main thing. So you don't want to throw them or blow your load on basically like, oh, put them in on, Nurgle. Will they win? Maybe. Will they lose? Probably not. Or it just depends on what we're building in the player and the battle plan. But let's say you put that against such a fragile army where you're just going to delete them in one turn. That's your 20-0. So that's where you're really leaning into these specific types, where you're waiting for that glass cannony or castle-y army that you're going to counter directly. And that's why you're bringing this thing with you. So I know like the Lumineth Helon build, you could essentially bring whatever you think is going to be a hard counter to that, specifically expecting each team to have one, and you're saving it for that.
Yeah.
So just kind of thinking about it in that way. Whereas it's not a bad army, but it's not going to perform it, the way you intended it versus different pairings. So that's where I think you're getting at, is maybe it's not going to be amazing, but it's not going to lose by much potentially as well.
Yeah, so we could spend some amount of time talking about what the actual army composition is on the Dutch team, and I could even speak to Serbia, who I'm playing with. But at the risk of lists being due within the next few weeks, maybe it's not necessarily the right time to talk about it. Maybe after those have been committed to. But in general, do you feel like what do you think the Dutch team that you're obviously training with is kind of leaning more towards, or maybe initially started with? What's kind of your journey been? You don't have to give away too many secrets of the ins and outs, but what's kind of the journey been for you guys? Has it been largely based off of what everyone has access to? I know you're playing someone else's models, or mostly. Where do we sit on kind of that spectrum? How flexible have you guys been able to be? How have you guys been wanting to be more flexible, but for other reasons couldn't? Where do you kind of sit on that spectrum?
Yeah, so from the starting point where we ended up was, what does everybody want to play, and where that came from is like our skill base and our experience, and we started there. So we take a look at, okay, so what armies are available to you? Like you said, can you get access to them? Can we as a team get access to them? Do you have any interest in playing them? Do you have experience with playing them? And we start building it from there. And then, you take a long time to analyze what you've got and say, okay, this army is going to perform this way, this build is going to perform this way, and then you start to see, okay, we're leaning a little too heavy in, I don't know, just making stuff up like a control build, or we're leaning way too much into the specialist builds. We need to get more stability in our team.
Right.
So yeah, it's just been a journey about like figuring out the perfect balance within the roster and where is everyone going to line up, and also excel, right? So we don't want to just force people a list that they just can't play and say, figure it out, tough luck. So we kind of got to balance all of that together to make an optimal roster.
Yeah. The team that I was playing on for this tournament, like I mentioned, I was kind of playing mercenary again. I was originally planning on going with friends from the Dutch scene. It didn't end up working out that way. And I ended up jumping in on a team that needed one extra person. There was a German team. Our selection process was, like I mentioned before, much more casual. That said, we had a lot more overlaps of like artifacts and stuff like that because, well, I don't know if I'd say it's necessarily because we were just kind of doing what we want to do, but it doesn't, certain armies, maybe you don't want to have too many of our armies that have like the same goals. For example, I was playing Lumineth, Helon, Teclis, and that we had a Zinj player, and this is also a potential option for my Serbian experience for Worlds. And that Teclis build and Zinj in general really want Umbral Spell Portal. And
yes,
if you can't get access, if one of them can't get access to it, it kind of, shoots the other one in the foot or whatever, while helping the one that does get it. And so I don't know. I found that we had more trouble kind of coming together on this, maybe because we weren't a unified team. We're just random people kind of coming together. And it does sound like you guys had a smoother go at it, at least in the sense that you guys were using this tournament as a way to prepare for something bigger, and the conversation was already started and had been going on for quite a while. So I don't know if that's fair, but we don't get another tournament like this until Worlds, and so. I mean, are you playing? You don't have another team's turn between now and then, right?
No, not yet.
Right, you're not going. I know that Denmark's got something going on in Copenhagen.
Yeah, no, but not making it to that one.
Yeah. So you were referencing the team pairing system, and this is where I really want to lean into your knowledge of what you've experienced in teams events thus far. I've kind of labeled it as a mini game with a Texas Hold'em vibe, which is, a rough analogy at best. But maybe you can explain that, and then also I'll just preface that by saying that before, in between rounds, you usually get about 45 minutes to an hour for your team to know, maybe less, to know what you're going up against. And you have this discussion where you sit there and say, who are we good against? Who wants to go up against who? Let's talk about the lists and try to figure that kind of stuff out. My team certainly was doing some amount of that, but we didn't walk in with like a matrix of like good matchups before we went into the tournament. What was kind of y'all's process on this? What was kind of your approach? You only have 30 minutes plus to handle this. What did you guys usually do?
Yeah, so we congregated. We'd look at the list. We'd look at the battle plans that we're gonna our options, and also the terrain maps are a big part of that. So that takes up a little bit of time, and you know usually just waiting for your opponent to show up to the pairing, so everyone kind of finds a corner that they can speak it in their own language. So I was just kind of looking blankly when everyone's speaking Dutch.
Right.
And I'll just throw in at the end, yes, I agree, for no reason.
Nice.
But yeah, so that's how it really kicks off. Is like you just kind of do a quick review of what you've got. You have a pretty good idea of who you're going to go up against before the pairings are officially announced, so you can do a little bit more homework beforehand. And then it's go time. You sit down across from them in a very intimidating way. It's very fun for you to bring your entire army or your entire team to stare at the other team while we do the card game.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of fun. And then what else do you want me to go through? Just how it works? Or?
Yeah, like talk a bit about. I've got the loose kind of outline here of the attacker defender thing, and then choosing a battle plan and table.
Yeah. So with this tournament, it depended on who won the roll off or who was going to be, the main attacker defender, like for the teams, basically. I don't know if I'm using the right term, but then depending on who wins, that gets to pick the table, which would then dictate the terrain map. And then when you put down your first round, it's already going for a specific battle plan, so you know who's going to be on here. So for round one, let's just say it's only the worthy, just as an example. And then whoever wins picks the table, and then each player is then going to lay down a defender card, and this is a reference to one of the members on your team. It usually just has your army sigil on it, and then you put them down face down. This is an important start because, like I mentioned before, this defender kind of needs to be one of those anvils that can just take a punch and also deal it out. It doesn't really matter what they're going to get. They're a decent control. So then after both players have put their defender down, they're going to flip it over at the same time. And then what will happen is each player or each team will then select 2 attackers from their own army and give this to the opponent face down. This is the important part of what you think your best 2 options are for the defender that they laid down. This is also an interesting point of when the specialist can come into play, because you can make this a very hard choice for them, whereas you really put your specialist down to knock out that 20-0, but then you also put a very, very tough matchup as a backup in the event that they don't pick it. If you give them an obvious out, you're never going to get your pairing. So you got to really be able to supplement that. So that's pretty fun. And then once you put down the 2 attackers, the opposite team will collect them, and they will make a choice of who they want to put up against their defender. And then the cycle repeats itself until everybody has an opponent in the matchup. So that's at a pretty high level of how it works. The more interesting bit as it goes is when you have to keep track of what's left in their roster. So which battle plans are left and what armies do they have left. So you can really force a pairing as you get closer to the end, where they were keeping somebody out of sight, like, oh, we're going to keep our Lumineth off the table for now. And you're like, okay, well now I've got the perfect counters for him because I saved it. So you can kind of really put in a lot of strategy in the pairing system, which is, for me, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think for me, there's another version of me that would really like this, but the thing is, I've already got so much shit flowing around in my head about Warhammer anyway. Not that we don't all have to learn a lot of stuff, but I go out of my way to, I don't know, have other information in my head than the average Warhammer player, let's say. Maybe not better information, but a shit ton of it. And by the time we get to this, I'm just exhausted, and I can't process all the combos. I just want to get in there and do it. I'll throw my 2 cents in about who I'd like to pair up against, but in this particular tournament, I was playing the kind of list that can pretty much take on 2/3, 3/4 of the armies on the team anyway. So I wasn't too concerned, you know. So
Yeah.
all right.
No.
Well, yeah. No, go for it. Go for it.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, this is like really right up your alley as well. Like, because there's a lot of like stats I think you could pull from this that I think you would probably really enjoy. So
Yeah, I mean, there's even in playing, like I've talked about Marvel Snap on here, but like even in playing that a lot, I do keep stats of how I do on that. And it's a card game that has like some timing issues that are similar to what you just said about like I'm gonna wait till I show this thing that I've got until like withholding information. Whereas Warhammer, I've gotten so used to all of your cards are on the table from the beginning. You know,
no pun intended.
yeah, exactly. So, so I feel like I'm kind of in another world when we're doing this little mini game, and I'm just like, whatever. I think I've played about 6 teams tournaments now, and I barely pay attention for this section, so which makes me, not the best team captain. But anyway.
And I don't know why, but like my adrenaline gets pumping during the pairing system. Like I get more amped during that. I'm like, oh man, like just the suspense of flipping cards over is so stressful. Like. It's amazing.
Oh, I do too. I mean, I get nervous, but it's not because I find it exciting, you know. All right, yeah. So let's move on to the meta.
Sure.
So the player base, as always, is largely competitive. It's a training ground for Worlds, and it was regionally international. I might need your help on this, but I think we had obviously it was in Germany. It was in Osnabrück, technically in Melle, but Osnabrück was the closest city that more people would know. And there were a lot of German teams, of course. But we also had, for the AOS Worlds teams, I believe we had Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, maybe Switzerland. I know Switzerland was there, but I don't remember if their Worlds team was there. Who else did? And Czech Republic.
We had the Czech Republic, yep.
Was the Swiss team the official Worlds team, or was they just kind of Swiss people that were there?
I am not sure on that one.
Okay, we did not have Team France, which could have been a thing, because it's not that far away. And then there might have been a couple other groups of people. We had a couple other Belgian teams there that were not officially on the Worlds team, and one other Dutch team that wasn't officially on the Dutch Worlds team. But it was pretty international, all things considered. And especially since people are playing as a group of 8, and usually from the same country, that really kind of drives home the point that it's international, whereas when it's singles and people aren't necessarily announcing where they're from, you don't necessarily have a big sense for it unless you ask the TO.
Right.
So instead of breaking down which armies were there, it's more of a breaking down which armies weren't there, because it was 14 teams of 8 players, so it's 112 players in total. And I've just taken a screenshot here of the new recruit, that app's version of the output of what the armies and how they did. So you can kind of just see what the meta looked like. There's one that says Age of Sigmar here in the middle, like the upper third. I don't know what that's supposed to be, so maybe ignore that one. But this is just the output that it has. As you can see, the only 2 factions that didn't exist at all in this tournament out of 112 players were Cities and Soulblight, of which maybe I'm not surprised about Cities, but definitely Soulblight, even though, like, I guess they've been getting worse over time as their book ages. But that's just such a popular and flexible army. Like, I've played it 32 times now, so it's kind of weird to have none of them at 112 players. And as you can see also from the chart, if you look at the draws column, this tournament had a crazy amount of ties, which we don't usually see as much in our meta. And I don't know if it's just because it's a team setup and the way that they were ruling on these things allowed for more draws. But as you can see, Zinch evidently got 6 draws in total, which is a lot. 4 for Ogres. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on the kind of the data that we're seeing here? The order, the draws, the fact that no Cities or Soulblight was present.
I'm with you. I was surprised that there was no Soulblight. Cities I can understand. I can't believe we saw OBR over Soulblight. I mean, I didn't get to see all of the lists, or remember them. So I don't recall that Soulblight wasn't there. So it was kind of a surprise. Yeah, I'm also a little bit surprised that Suns is so high, to be honest.
Yeah, people have been talking shit about Suns in the new GC meta, but I'll be honest, I don't use most of those GC grand strategies anyway. Um,
Yeah.
so maybe that was again overshooting, even on the grand or not. Sorry, I said grand strategies, but I meant battle tactics. Um, maybe that was overshooting in all of us theory crafting what this season was going to look like. Though of course GCs are more important than they previously were, right? At least with an aspect of the champion that does something that makes a difference. Or
Well, and also an interesting one here is that, like, is there only one Suns player? Because it's 3 wins, 2 losses, total is 5 played, and he's at 60%. So it's just one player.
it's got to be, yeah.
But then, yeah.
So yeah, you got to read into. So that's one of those things people criticize
Yeah.
about the Meta Watch when they look at the difference between Honest Wargamer Rob's data, which is only 5 game tournaments like GTS, and then the GW data, which is more spread out. People sometimes who don't know a lot about statistics uh, give them shit about the plus or minus like 11% next to what someone's win rate is. The reason they do that, if it's it's a confidence interval for those that don't know. It basically reflects how much information we even have over that army. So in this particular sense, Suns literally performed at that rate, but because it was only one player, I guess, what that means is that we wouldn't have a lot of confidence that 60% would be reflective of reality. It could just be that this player ended up doing well, and or people walked into this meta not expecting to have to go up against Suns and didn't have the DPS check ready. So this one person benefited from the fact that the meta has been telling us we're not supposed to play Suns, but this one person snuck through the door. Does that make sense, what I'm talking about there? When we have a low sample size, the win rate can often be misleading.
Yeah. I mean, I'm here for Math Hammer.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I will get to take credit for one of those losses from the Suns player though, because I didn't know he was the only one. So there you go. There you go.
Okay. I guess according to this, who did we have the highest representation would be the played. It looks like our highest representation was Lumineth. Is that right? No, Slaves. Slaves was the highest. I remember that we had a bunch of those. So 18% of the meta. But they only performed at 35% win rate, which is interesting. So where's Stormcast? Stormcast is sitting right in the middle at 51. So anyway, let's move on. The experience. So team experience. Team the Netherlands did 5 out of 14. Crown of Champions, my team did 8. Some other like the top 3 here, we got Team Belgium, Team Germany. These are the world's teams, and then the local team from Osnabrück. And then other notable things would be the other Dutch team that we're friends with, De Style. I believe they were right under you guys. Is that right?
I think they were 2 below us. I can't remember.
Okay, I should have double checked everything, but they were in between my team and you guys, so that's for sure. And then it was. I mean, out of only 14 teams, you start to look at it and say, well, that sample size is pretty low. What can we tell from that? But keep in mind that the teams that we've got so many games going on with that team that every team's got a chance to. I mean, there's literally 8 matchups per round, and there's a cap, right, on how many points you can possibly get in a particular round. Do you remember what that cap was?
No, it was 100 and something, I think, or 60 and I don't remember.
Yeah, it was somewhere between 60 and 100, I think. But regardless, the point is, like, if all 5 of your teammates got a 20-0, you don't end up getting 100. They cap it at like 80, I think, or something like that, so that it doesn't go out of hand if you have a really favorable matchup, and then someone else who's equally competitive just doesn't get lucky with their matchup, which I kind of like. I felt good about it. How'd you guys feel about the place you took? What's the kind of talk?
We're okay with it. I think we all agree as a team we can do better. And I think the other thing was that this was our first outing as our team altogether. So this is the first time that this group has ever been on the same team, performing together in a tournament. We actually didn't have the full roster of the world's team, so we had 2 replacements. both really good, but it was just like I said, it wasn't everything we thought it could be. I think all of us took some good lessons learned back with us to get better for the next ones.
Yeah, that's fair. And I feel like our team, we were at the top end of the bottom 50% in terms of the team rankings. I feel like that's pretty good for a team that just kind of randomly came together.
Sure.
I was pretty happy with it. So personal experience, Nick, with your gets. Oh, I didn't change mine. I actually went 4-1. So I didn't give myself credit here. You would think it was worse by the place that we had. I had to quickly edit these slides to get ready for today because I'm about to go to Serbia to train with those guys. But Nick, you were playing with Gits and you had a 4-1, which was 30th place, but 22nd with a win-loss sorting system. I took the time to do this for the two of us. The reason being that you actually, I think the number that was, for those that actually go back and look at New Recruit, the number that you were assigned was like 33, but there were like 5 different people at 33, like are tied for the exact same score of points you got, and they just like alphabetically ordered you or whatever, something random. I don't think it was based off of strength of schedule, but if someone from the tournament knows, that's interesting information to have. It wasn't quite clear how they ended up ranking individuals. But still, in either case, 30th place, 33rd place, or 22nd place is still pretty good for 112 people. How did you feel about your performance?
It was okay. So this, I would say, was the first tournament I did with him. Yeah, it was. This was the first tournament I took the Gits to. And so I learned a lot. It was rusty my first game. I made several really stupid mistakes, which we'll talk about when we do the pairings. But overall, I think each game got better as the day went on. So it was okay. I know I can play better.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, for the fact that, I mean, both of us went in with very few games. I only had 2 games under my belt with Lumineth up to this point. And you only had about 6, I think. So, can't really complain about that. This was the best I've ever done. At a 4-1, again, not a 2-3. The 45th place, the 15 person difference there seems to be pretty significant, but it was based off of how many points we got. They were sorting based off of how many victory points you ended up taking home in total, which, to be fair, to my resorting of things, is a higher priority with teams tournaments, but not necessarily with individuals. Obviously, if you're an individual playing for a team, you're trying to get as many points for the team as possible. So I totally understand why they would sort that way. But when we usually look at individual rankings for tournaments, the default setting is win-loss is your first sorting mechanism, and the second is your points. And so I was curious what we would have done if we played the exact same matchups and with the exact same outcome, but with win-loss being the main sorting thing. Which 23rd, you and I were right next to each other, which is pretty crazy. And 4-1, first time doing a 4-1, and I was really happy with how it turned out with playing the net list for the most part, walking in. You've heard me talk about this already, but like with barely any games under my belt, I can give some props definitely to Jonas and the channel in general for just my amount of awareness with Lumineth walking in before I even really had any experience. But also the build of the army, as everyone knows, is very decision heavy in the hero phase. It's a castle army and it's a shooting army. The Helon Techless build with Sentinels, and I'm just relatively acquainted with that game style, that play style, so wasn't too crazy for me to jump into, and it just got so many tools that it's pretty obvious how to play it if you know what you're doing, I guess. And then the best individual player was Nicolas Rossos from Team Belgium, which makes sense because they ended up winning, with Beasts of Chaos, and he had a 5-0 and I think 85 points in total. Technically, you can get 100 points as a player, but considering the best that anyone did is 85, trying to compare yourself to the best possible is often meaningless. It's better to compare it to the best person at the tournament, which would be 85 in this case. So, all right, let's move on to your list, Nick.
Alrighty.
Let's tell us what's going on here, Mr. Bad Moon Rising.
So yes, that's my Bad Moon Rising. Already, you may notice this list cannot exist anymore. It's over the points. So what I was doing here is that I took the subfaction King's Gits, which apparently will let me re-roll, and I can still fail. So that's awesome, and I do often. But what it is at the end of my Battle Shock phase, 4-up, I can bring back a destroyed unit at half strength. And what the subfaction does is if I don't nail the 4-up, I can re-roll it, which I usually also will not get. So super fun, but it's better than, it's been helpful with the small unit size. My grand strategy is chasing the moon, which means I need to have my selected general be under the moon for 3 rounds and survive. Pretty easy to do with the Trog boss. Just park him in the back and you're good to go. And then I took the Triumph Indomitable. Like I mentioned with the Trog boss, he's got the Loon Skin, which lets me take an endless spell for free. So I take Scuttle Tide. Then he's got the artifact, the Glowy Howitz, which is a 4-up ward. But every time I use it, I have to roll a die, and on a 1, it gets destroyed. So you can imagine how many times that happened. Then we've got Scraggy, which he's great. A lot of tricks with him. Mostly the claim to fame is the War Scroll spell. Goes off on a 3. He gets +1 to his cast, so it's almost always going off. And then for a unit within 24 inches, every 3-up is a mortal wound. So it's pretty good for sniping out of position heroes.
Yeah.
Then we've got Grinkra. I call him Ginkgo because I don't like saying that word. So Ginkgo's main thing is he lets a unit fight on death, a unit that he's within 3 inches of. Then we've got my Squig Boss, who does squiggly things. Mostly unleashing my Squig Herd lets me move every Squig Herd unit that's wholly within 12 in the hero phase, once per battle. And then he's got some other tricks for other hero phases, giving him mushrooms like extra attack or 6s or mortal wounds you get to pick. And then for my last hero here, I've got my Madcap Shaman, who's got a teleport spell. He's also got an artifact, the Moonface Mommet, which is a -1 save to a target unit. And then I gave him the Tunnel Master.
Is that once per game?
No.
Okay. The Mommet, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, the mom is always there, but you elect them in the combat phase.
So quick comment real quick. You're one of the only armies in the game that has heroes that are under 5 wounds. So when I was computing your total wounds and bodies count, I was surprised to see, what is it, both the Shaman and the Squig Boss both only have 4 wounds apiece.
They're really hard to keep alive if you position poorly.
My question for you is, did you ever, just by default, thinking of heroes as always counting as 2 models on objective, even though it's based off their wounds count, did you accidentally ever count them as 1 extra?
No.
Okay.
I rarely ever had them on objectives where it mattered, because as we get to the next one, I have 30 Squig Hoppers, and that's usually where we stopped counting.
Right.
So it doesn't matter.
Fair enough.
Then I had a block of 20 Stabbas, 6 Sneaky Snufflers, and then a big old chunk of Squig Herds. So the fun part about the Squig Herds, if you don't know, is the amount of models that flee to Battle Shock. On a 2-up per model, you can choose an enemy unit within 9 inches and do a mortal wound.
Yeah.
So that's the big fun. And then, so really the mechanics of this list is throw the Squig Herd in, kill a bunch from the 6s or mortal wounds from the Squig Boss, then potentially giving them fight on death from Ginkgo. You strike back, they fight back, they kill you, then they do mortal wounds on top of that. And then if you manage to do 72 wounds, then I roll my dice and hopefully, 18 of them are back. So it's quite rough.
Yeah, so I think one of the things people might, who have only played against the old Gits, haven't been keeping up with the new changes. First off, you're a lot faster and more reliably fast with the Squigs now than you used to be. You've got a crazy amount of synergy with buffs and things you can be giving off. You also have 2 wounds apiece, which meant you got up to 232 wounds in this list, which is impossible to table. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's pretty hard. And everything is so cheap. Now, with the points changes that just came through, what are we talking about that's different now?
So Scragrat went up 50. Squig Boss went up 20, Snufflers went up 20, and the Squig Herd went up 10 apiece.
So that's another 40 for that. So, yeah, for the Squig Herds, I mean.
Yeah.
So do you feel like that's enough to hamper the army or put it back into the reasonable range, or does it still feel like it needs a little more kind of massaging to get it to the place where it's not just like everyone's going to run this if they're running Gits?
Well, I mean, let's put it this way: 390 points for 72 wounds and mortal wounds on running, and then I get to bring them back. I'll pay that price every time.
Right.
It's absurdly good. So I don't think that that the squig herd is dead. It's definitely cost you to make choices, so you really have to give up some stuff um, and make some swaps. You're not going to get all the fun things in one list anymore. But yeah, I mean, I'm working it out of what makes the most sense. I know trogs are a big one now. People are loving the trogs or blending them a little bit with the bounders and whatnot. I've seen some interesting lists with allies actually, so I'm checking out what the community is doing with them. But yeah, I think it's a good start to that. I don't think they've. I think it was a soft touch. I don't think they were intending to go out to cripple the book when it just came out.
Yeah.
So I think this was a good start.
How much does the rally change impact this list?
So this list is quite impacted with the rally one, because in one of my games, for example, with the hoppers, I'm rolling 26 dice on a 4-up rally. It can be devastating.
Oh,
when so
yeah,
you're not gonna fit all of them in, but you know what I mean. It's like it really made a difference. But now with only 5, it doesn't really. It's not as helpful as it was. And to be honest, though, in a lot of these games, I didn't really get a whole lot of opportunities to rally. There was only a few, and the only the chance that I got to rally was really when you're stringing really big lines across the board. Creating like screens and whatnot, or making sure that you're within range of your buff pieces. And what happens is they kill enough in the front that I can pull away from that after fight on death, and then be outside of 3, and then it's my turn to rally him back. So that was the opportunities that I had, but it's kind of a trade-off there, because now with only getting 5 models, it's not really that much worth it.
Right. Yeah, and so for those that don't know what he's referring to, why he's saying 5, they changed rally so that you can only bring back 10 wounds worth of guys back in one turn. So because your squig hoppers count as 2, that's where it's really kicking you in the ass a bit, which is weird because I was just complaining that they each are 2 wounds apiece. And we're not talking about the squig herd, by the way, because they can't receive command abilities. They have their own way of coming back, but it's not based off of rally. So, yeah, it's interesting that balanced out. I hadn't really thought about it. Only bringing back 5 does make a difference, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
So... But yeah, I don't know. I feel like those two things might have made enough of a dent, but I feel like this army is still kind of a rolls eyes a bit. Not that it's your fault, but you've heard me bitch about it so much. I'm just gonna leave that. I'll leave it to the imagination of the listeners. But but speaking of lists to bitch about, unless you want to say something else, Nick, is there anything else you wanted to add about this?
No, I think the mechanics are there. I said it, but then yeah, it's a thank you for letting me play test all of my competitive lists on you. I know your eyes probably hurt from the eye rolls.
Well, the funny thing is, as I switch to my list, the funny thing is this is the only list I've been able to beat you with, and that was also kind of an eye roll for you, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I knew going in it was going to be a tough one. But, yeah. So
I've called it snarkily the Archmage net list because as a Johnny player, I fucking hate net listing. And of course, net list kind of rhymes with tech list. Jesus,
I didn't even notice that one.
Yeah. But I'll just run through it real quick for those that aren't familiar. We have a Lumineth-based channel, so I don't need to overdrive this home. But it's in Halon for the +1 attack if you're within 6 inches. Importantly, not in Unleash Hell for shooting units. I said that backwards. It's for shooting units, and then importantly not for Unleash Hell because it's only in your own shooting phase. Interestingly enough, Teclis actually doubles his output in shooting if he's within 6, which I actually did use. I don't bring him into combat necessarily, but definitely within 6. The Sentinels, of course, love doing it, and the Wind Chargers perform pretty well, even though they already have a base 2 attacks apiece. The champion has 3, so you're increasing at most 50% output, but it's still nice. Defend what's ours because ran the Lumineth grand strategies kind of suck unless you build specifically for them, and my team took take what's theirs out, and I just feel like there aren't a lot of amazing options. As a castle army, defend what's ours seemed reasonable, but it's way harder than take what's theirs, as everyone knows. And then inspire, but I never got to use it because I have 2,000 points. Like the list typically is built, I took a Scenari Cathalar. Jonas is not big on Cathalars. But I think the Cathalar is clutch as hell with the basically stronger version of the two versions of a Bellicor spell that you have. Teclis has access to the whole lore, so he knows the one from the Stone Mage lore. And then the Cathalar's got her own War Scroll spell that basically, if it goes off, which you can double stack them, can turn off a whole unit from doing whatever. With the weaker version, movement shenanigans or just movement, and with a stronger version, even fighting. So, Nick, you had to go up against this with your Gits, which is a pretty hard counter against Gits because you guys have low bravery. It's a bravery check. How do you feel about those spells?
Loved them.
Yeah.
Loved every minute of it. No, it's really, really good. It's powerful. It's definitely a hard counter for a lot of the for all of the destruction armies and things like that. So it's a really, really nice control piece that is hard to deal with.
Yeah, thing is, you're used to playing Feck, and you guys have bravery 10 across the board.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't be so strong against you, even though I can make one unit have -1 bravery every time I use either chords. It's just not. It's not going to make that big of a difference.
Right.
The Cathalar's also got Stubbornness of Rhinox, just so I've got a few more bodies. She's my only GC, so that's getting GC battle tactics is difficult. Fortunately, contrary to the Lumineth grand strategies, their versions of battle tactics are actually pretty good, which is why I took 3 endless spells in this list, because one of them says you have to have 2 endless spells on table at the end of your turn, which is actually pretty easy to do when you're an amazing spellcasting army. Phoenix Stone, I never actually got to use, I don't think, but I'm still a big fan of it. It just never came up, but it can bring back... It's basically fueled by Gurish Rage, but for Lumineth. And then Total Eclipse, this was a redundant spell, but it since all Scenari units can auto-cast once per game, it's not auto-cast, but an auto 9, which is what you need for Total Eclipse is 8, definitely. It's not a bad extra spell to choose for her. Teclis is Teclis. I don't know if we really need to talk about it. Worth pointing out is I almost never got to use my spell ignore thing that shoots back mortal wounds because people know better. And I didn't play a lot of super strong casting armies. In addition, I don't have access to the Umbral Spell Portal, which is basically amplifying Teclis's ability. Sometimes I call him Lord Texas. His ability to project the searing beams of light spell, which everyone hates, which I got to definitely use, but not as much as I would if I had had the portal, which projects it much further upfield. Lord Regent, you're using him, of course, to put a power of Hish on your Sentinels, especially 2 blocks of 20 Sentinels. Again, I took spells here, but who cares? You're barely using them. Sometimes you do, but the Wardens, a 10 block. Jonas is also a much bigger fan of Blade Lords, but these Wardens did a lot of work for me, and against a game I played against Feck, they just did not want to die. It took like 3 turns for him to kill a unit of 10. Which is pretty crazy. And then 5 Wind Chargers as battle line. One of my 2 units of Sentinels was battle line, which get turned on by every Warden unit you take. And then I had the Rune of Petrification, which unfortunately I was using wrong for my first 2 games, and then profusely apologized for to my 2 friends I played against in the first 2 games. I was using it as though it was Shackles, where if you're within range, you can't even make a charge move. And it's just -1 to charge and run, which makes me an evil person, unfortunately, but I tried to make up for it.
Yeah, that was a fun morning.
Oh, yeah, it was my first 3 games, actually, and I apologize to all 3. But it only impacted 2 of them, really. And then Life Swarm to keep healing some stuff and bringing back Sentinels and Wardens. Suffocating Gravetide, mainly just to have an extra life endless spell, in my list, and then to also block off charges to my castle, since it's got such a giant base and doesn't hurt any of my units as long as I choose not to have it run over my units. So only 87 wounds in comparison to Nick's 232. Um, 64 bodies on objectives and 61 models, and then it's a one-drop list. Nick, is there anything else you want to add about this?
No, I don't enjoy playing against it.
And I don't even enjoy playing it that much, but I will say it was nice to go 4-1, so let's just leave it at that. All right. Matchups. So, Nick, let's go back and forth like we do. Day one, for those that don't know, is the first 3 games, and then day 2 are the last 2. So you started with a beast list. Now, was this Team Germany?
Yes, this was against our friends, the Germans.
All right. So I put the Marathi photo here on the left here, or the daughter's photo, because we both played against the same Czech player who was playing a Kyla Braun Marathi in the Bowsnakes list. So I thought that would be a nice way to kind of honor him. He was a lovely opponent, but we'll come to that in a minute. Tell us about the beast list here.
Yeah, so this was the one that's been going around as kind of the sneaky, almost a null deploy list. With the Doom Bull and the Bulgors off to the side, and the whole thing is that you try to bring them in within range and line your charge, and everything's dead. So this one, I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but it's the battle plan where it's the quadrants, not actually objectives.
Yeah, I forget the name, but yeah.
Yeah. So this one started off pretty strong. I just pushed everything in the middle because I have a lot of bodies, and just try to lock down control. And then he was a really strong player. Kept the pressure on me. Dropped all his Bulgors in, and then it did a lot of work to lift them. Also, I made a couple critical errors in this game. I was very upset at the end of it, actually. Which was I left my shrine open a little too much. He got his Gorgon in there and crushed it. So that was I was now on the clock for resources. I misplayed a battle tactic, which I was kicking myself for the rest of the week for. And then so the points just got away from me on there. This was probably one of my worst played games. So I was shaking the cobwebs off. But overall, it was a good game. It was a good one to kind of get back into it and remember how this army is supposed to work. But yeah.
But you won.
No, I lost this one. This is what I lost.
Oh, I thought you lost to the Suns player.
No. I was saying he lost to me.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I haven't gotten to play New Beast but one time. It's and I've heard that this is a thing. But evidently for the Techless build, it's rough because I'm castling and moving slowly to get away from the board edge. But for my KO builds I've been playing, I'm in the middle of the table, and I kind of doubt that it's going to be the worst problem in the world. Those Bulgors aren't that hard to lift, right? They've each got 4 wounds apiece and not that great of a save.
So it's the big blocks of him, and then also being able to charge in your phase as well. So it's hard to stay away from him if he's able to deploy within 7 inches, which is what one of the artifacts for the Doom Bull is.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of forcing you to the center, right? So maybe that's not always the best position to be in.
Sure.
You got to make sure that you're able to screen properly from the table edge. And what I mean is that they usually take a big chunky bunch of ranged units that can shoot the closest unit to the table edge. So you got to remember to not leave anything behind that you will miss.
Sure.
Or it's gonna die from weight of dice. But it's a tough. It's for me, the way that I see this is you got to keep moving. It'll catch you slipping if you're sitting in one place too long, and then it'll position, or if it's really good at catching you out of position. So you got to be very quick and precise with what you're doing is what I noticed. I had an upper hand when it came to mobility because I was like, oh, okay, I can get away from this. I can do this, and that's where I started to start getting my points back and start clawing back into it. But by that time, it was too late.
Sure. So my first game was against one of the Belgian teams. This is a not the world's team for Belgium. It was actually a buddy, Dave de Kroop, from I think he lives in definitely either Ghent or Bruges, but he's associated with the Green Knight group that we've talked about in a few tournament reports. And we even played him. The last time I played him was at our doubles tournament in Mechelen. Had a good time playing with him. He's a nice guy. And he was playing a Blight Kings, Blowob, Orgot's kind of the big guys, but not more the mortal side of things. Nurgle list. This was one of the games where I misused Rune of Petrification, and that might have swung things a bit. I still think I had an upper hand on this, but I definitely think it would have been a closer match. I don't have too much to say about it, really. It was a nice way to start the tournament. I guess in general, if I were to talk about the tournament, I only got to play against nice people. Like, I didn't have a single particularly awkward matchup with anyone where I was just like hating like some kind of language barrier or social etiquette barrier or something like that. Everyone was lovely, and this was the start of one of the better tournaments out of the country for that kind of finding that kind of connection with the people you actually get matched up against. The first two games I got to play in Dutch, which to me in Germany is a win. So anyway, that was my first game. Sons, you played against the guy that we were talking about before in Breaker Tribe with 2 Gatebreakers, 1 Kraken Eater, and 3 mini Gargants. Anything of particular note here that you want to share with us?
This one was a very strong pairing for me, just because I actually had that damage output. So I think it was in one turn I dropped one of the big boys and a couple babies. With the squig. The squig herd just encircled the giant, and then there was mortal wounds nonstop, and then getting all the attacks, and then also I nailed the snuffler roll, so they were getting an extra attack. So it just dropped a giant right away, and then. Yeah, there was really not a whole lot that he could do about it. And it started to get a little tedious, I think, for him. And then he was ready to wrap it up. So then it was one of the quicker games that I had.
Do you remember where this team was from?
I don't. No, I can't recall.
Okay. But you don't get a sense that it was one of the German teams?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, my second game was, again, against a friend. Actually, my most played against friend at tournaments. I think we played 4 times now, which is Paul von der Weide. If anyone's paying attention to these tournament reports, Paul and he's come up a good bit. He was playing Night Haunt, and Night Haunt, this was a really tense game and also super close. I think it was my closest of the ones I actually won. He's playing Scarlet Doom with a million Blade Geists and some Spirit Torments and some of the other normal stuff you have in there. The thing that really caught me off guard, by the way, as far as my missions were concerned, I only played things from the last GHB. We didn't really reference this, but the missions you play at Teams tournaments like this are often all of the missions that are in a current GHB, and you don't really know. There's no way to really prepare for it other than to just get familiar with all the missions that are possible and or have people steer you in the direction for your matchups, your pairings, for missions you do know better. As such, I like it because it gives me an excuse to practice twists and turns. But I know most people don't agree with that outlook. But I unfortunately only got to play missions that I'd previously played. I think I played Realmstone Cache on my third game, 2 times Nidus Pass, and oh gosh, I'm forgetting what the other mission was, but it was definitely stuff that everyone's heard too many times about already. So nothing particularly exciting there. But basically, my main gripe with Night Haunt is that they've got a grand strategy that allows them to basically just get it for free so long as none of their units are contesting an objective at the end of the game or all of their units are dead. That's not how it's worded, but that is kind of the easy way to get it. And I was like, how is this? What kind of interaction is there here? I know that even the Tzeentch one, at least they choose to keep 9 points worth of dice around. Did you have any grand strategies you played against, Nick, that kind of felt like, I can't believe they wrote this? Like, why does that get to be in the game?
I mean, I didn't feel really bad about it, but I always kind of think that with the daughters one where everything needs to fight or die.
Oh, yeah.
That one's pretty easy to get.
Well, actually, I shouldn't even ask you because yours is one of those. That's the reason why you took the big guy. You just let him sit next to the shrine until he You know.
Yeah, until he scores it, and then he runs away.
Oh my God. Yeah. All right. So never mind. Yours is one of those. Um,
Yeah.
but
Well,
yeah.
but I think the difference there is interaction. You can stop that. You just have to commit to stopping it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think what you're talking about with Nighthawk, especially with retreat and all, like it's very hard to keep them, within 3 inches. Um, yeah, that's a hard one to deny. And then the same when with daughters, that one is just misplays if you don't get everyone to fight or die.
Yeah. The Nighthawk one is basically saying that I can't be contesting, or they have to be every objective that they're contesting. Like they can't have any of my models on them or something like that. But then all you do is just get off the objectives. Is basically the thing.
Yeah.
It's something like that. Anyway, it was a lovely game though. I always love playing against Paul, and I pulled out another tight win on that one. But yeah, it was not like doing Mortal Wounds against Nighthaunt definitely gives me an upper advantage. But then he was just off table for a good chunk of it, and I think he might have gotten to choose who goes first. So. All right, you played against our shared opponent. He's from the Czech team. Go ahead and tell us about that game for the end of day one.
Yeah, that was a really fun game. I wanted to end day one on a positive note, so this was the make or break moment for me. I was a little unsure about how well this list would do against such a shooting army, and also a highly mobile one potentially. So keeping up with me in speed and whatnot, and also trying to run away. It was fun. I don't. So this one kind of went back and forth quite a bit, but the thing that I loved about my list in particular, and why I was okay with going against daughters, is the War Scroll spell from Scragrot is almost 100% of the time putting Marathi's 3 wounds into her with the War Scroll spell. So it's just okay, done, and then I get to move on and do other things. So it's not like other armies where I have to kind of really overcommit to make sure that I get the clock running on Marathi. So that was a nice change of pace, and then this one, I was just nailing my charges. So this one, I don't think has anything to do with me or the list. It was just dice on this part of I was hitting my charges every single time from at least 9 inches away, and then he would teleport away, and I would easily teleport back to him, land the charge again. There was just no getting away from me at that point. So really, really good control. It worked out quite well. I think we ended up I think he conceded at some point, or I don't know that we played all 5 rounds, but it was a good game. It was a very strong game for the Gits. I had most board control, and then being able to be so mobile, definitely was keeping the pressure on the entire time.
Do you have
a really, really fun opponent?
Do you have a sense for what your score was?
No, I don't think it was by much, to be honest, because with the daughter's capability to pick up battle tactics pretty easily, he was able to keep the points relatively within range. I think it might have been like a 16-4 or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I mean, it's still good. It's still good. I just realized I misspelled their subfaction. It's Kyle met an E. But anyway, I'm going to jump ahead and talk about him. I think his name was it's spelled Rewas, and I don't want to butcher the name. I want to say it's Revas or Reus, but he was my favorite opponent. My new discovery opponent. Obviously, I liked playing my 2 friends at the beginning, but even though I lost, this was my one game I lost. Super bad matchup for me. He was so lovely to play against, and we both played in a very similar manner. I don't know if this is something you picked up on with regards to how kind of clear he is with how he plays and what he wants to do, and just like tokens and keeping track of things and playing with intention. I just found it to be a very fair game to lose, and I enjoyed the process. So I think we both had a good time playing each other. I just think that Marathi build, and with the teleport of the snakes, I think he had the choice of the first turn. Or if he didn't, then I maybe mistakenly gave it to him, and it was an uphill battle. I got lucky and finally got to take out Marathi with Teclis before I got totally tabled by the end of the game. But it was a lovely game, and my favorite game of the tournament, actually, even though I lost, to the point about a lot of times the game is less about crushing your opponents and more about like having good interactions with people that maybe are interesting or unexpected, or like are close enough or challenging enough that it gets you going instead of just wiping someone out and totally like controlling someone. But it was a lovely game, and even though we skipped ahead here, it was a great start to my fourth day, or my fourth game, my second day, and in a sense that, like you said, the end of your first day, kind of a nice mirror image there.
It's interesting you mentioned the mistakenly given the turn away or anything like that, because we had a similar moment in our game actually where he ended up taking first turn. And I was like, are you sure? Well, in my head, I think he saw that I kind of made like eyebrows. He was like, and he basically was very straightforward. He was like, I have to get on this to score points or else I'm just going to get stuck. So he was very good at like positional awareness and like seeing, I would say almost intuitive of like, he was really pretty good on, he knew where I was going to go in advance. So he was trying to mitigate that as best as possible. So I think that it was a credit to his skill of how he was able to keep up with me kind of having board control the entire time.
Yeah. So. What's also interesting is last year, when I was at the same tournament, I played the Czech team, and their current coach, I don't know if I'm butchering his name, but Pan Orzo, he was a lovely opponent. We played for the last game, which for people who play tournaments, the last game can often be you just want to go home. And he was such a great sport. He beat me as well, but it was a lovely interaction. And then I saw that he was taking photos of his team and documenting the whole thing this time. And I said hi to him, and then we got matched up as teams. And he guaranteed me that my game against the Daughters player here was going to be as good as my experience was the previous year. And he wasn't wrong. So thus far, my experience of the Czech team has been very positive. So definitely looking forward to seeing them at Worlds. All right, day 2 for you started with Stormcast. I don't even remember you playing a Stormcast opponent, so I don't know much about this game, but apparently it had 8 dragons, 15 vanquishers, a Lord Relictor, and a Lord Castellan, and that was it. Like, it was like there wasn't a lot you could do with that, squeeze into that list. How did it perform?
Well, if we had our cameras on, you'd be kind of seeing my face of like, the fuck? I didn't play Stormcast. Because I didn't. This player dropped out. I ended up actually playing Gitz.
Oh, okay. What's the story on that? Sorry, I just did this based off of what was
No.
listed.
I totally understand. It was one of the reserve players from a different team. I forget which team they came from. I think it was the coach of another team that just jumped into play with me. And then he was playing a full Trog list. So he had a bunch. I think he had one block of 6 Trogs, and the rest were MSU Trogs with the mixture of Fellwater, and then he did the double dank, which was pretty cool.
Wow. That definitely sounds sexual.
Oh yeah, I didn't hear about it until I was in this Gitz WhatsApp group, and it's just they love their double dank.
Double dank. All right.
So that I'm definitely adopting it.
Nice.
But yeah, so he was running the double dank, and then a couple of units of Trogs. This was my largest win. It was 19-1 win over them, and this was fight on death won me the game. So really, just yes, he hit me very, very hard multiple times, but I was able to just strike back just as much, and then with full buffs up during that, it's just as punishing. It doesn't really matter. And then with a rally, bringing them right back, then it's my turn, flying over, doing mortal wounds, and then just rinsing and repeating the process. Just didn't have enough wounds to keep up with that. Also, he had the same kind of luck I do with the shrine with bringing stuff back. He failed it a couple times on re-rolling it. But also, I think he had a squig, a Mangler squig as well in there, if I'm not mistaken.
Nice.
So,
and those have gotten cheaper, right?
Yeah, I think they went down by 10 or 20 points, something like that.
Okay.
That thing actually went after my shrine and tried to kill my dank.
Nice.
And we ended up bringing him down eventually.
Triple dank.
Yes, there was 3 danks on the table, and
Nice.
this was actually quite fun because if you don't know, if you have 2 Gits players, you have to roll off to see where the moon goes and everything like that. And if you have 2 Scrag Rods, 2 people are going to use the spell to keep it. So the moon was in the middle the entire game, so everything was just really intense there. But it was a fun game.
That's pretty. Yeah, that's pretty insane. Like, I don't think any other armies that play mirror matches get that experience. Like, I didn't have. If one player reverses the tides and the other one doesn't, it doesn't, like, they don't have to figure that out. It's just that's how they work.
Yeah.
They each get their
And then
own.
I think it's also pretty interesting of how drastically different the play styles are between, because we both kept telling each other back and forth, like, I don't know how the trogs work, and he's like, well, I have no idea how the squigs work. So we were kind of teaching each other the rest of the book, which was fun. But it was just like, yeah, it was almost like I was playing an entirely different army. The core mechanics were there, but like overall, it was wildly different play style, and
Yeah, yeah. For those that don't entirely know why Nick just referred to that as the rest of the book, instead of referring to the spiders as if they're a real thing, is because the spiders are underpowered, relatively speaking, and you'll never see them at a tournament unless it's just for fun. But maybe that'll change. Maybe it'll be like Bone Splitters that'll have their day in the sun. Who knows? Yeah, so cool that you went up against Gits. Yeah, sorry I've got the Stormcast thing in here, but yeah, I definitely did. Something felt off because I didn't remember you talking about that.
Yeah, but I don't think this list was listed anywhere. Like he had like a printout or something like that. So I think this was really just like some random backup they found. So there's no way you were gonna find it anyway. So
yeah.
I even forgot about it.
Yeah. So since I already did my 4th game, which was start of day 2, I'll talk about my end of day 1 game, which was against this lovely person named Michelle, who was from one of the 2 Würfelgötter teams. There was one that was, and I think that translates as Dice Gods. But they had Elite Fun and Fun Elite. I don't remember which one she was from, but everyone in that group of teams seemed to just be there to have a good time. Not that they weren't good players, but it was definitely chiller vibe. She was playing a host of the Everchosen list with kind of a mixture of a bunch of stuff. This was my last time using Rune improperly. That definitely would have changed some things for her if she had gotten her Chaos Knights Chaos Warriors in the middle of the table. But in any case, I ended up just it was one of those games that felt a little bad, where I was just kind of like shutting everything down and rolling higher than the knights that were trying to charge. So I know for a fact they weren't stopped by my misuse of the Rune of Petrification. But the Chaos Warriors would have definitely come in. That said, she got to rally a whole bunch of them because they weren't. I kept shooting them, and then they weren't in combat, so they got to rally. So I don't know where the balance would have come from that, but I did feel bad and apologized the next day. But otherwise, this was my only Realmstone Cache game, and Realmstone Cache is just so strong for my type of build, which is often a castle shooting build. You just get in the middle and then just dominate, and nothing was different this time. She had a block of 10 chosen that could have done some stuff, but never really got to due to how the terrain was placed. Speaking of which, this tournament has something that we don't usually see at tournaments, which is infinite terrain, which has changed even how it works since I was there last year. But it basically not only blocks line of sight, but like if you stand on it, you can't be shot and you can't shoot yourself. Like your own unit can't shoot that's standing on it. So did that come up for you in any of your games, Nick?
No. We only ever just used it for line of sight.
Right. I mean, if you want to say you can't see through it, that's fine. But they've got a rule at this tournament, at least, that said like the closest model has to be targeted, which doesn't make any sense. Like if it blocks line of sight, it should just be if you can see one of the models that isn't blocked, you should be able to shoot them, right? Not like you have to shoot the unit that's closest in the unit.
Yeah. So I did definitely use that to my advantage quite a lot because I had 30 hoppers, so I could kind of stand out in the open, but then put the closest one over there, which I don't particularly like it, but them's the rules. So I'd be dumb not to use them.
Sure.
But yeah, so that came up a couple times in my games.
Yeah. But we had a lovely game. She was my first opponent that I didn't know ahead of time, and it was a good matchup. All right, your last game was kind of an intense one, if I remember correctly. Fire Slayers, Magmadroth, a couple Rune Smiters for some deep strikes, probably 20 Hearthguard Berserkers, and some other stuff going on, some Volkites. Tell me about this matchup.
Yeah, so this was definitely
Team
Yeah.
Belgium, right?
Yes, this was against the Belgians. This round for our team was kind of the make or break it if we wanted to place. Um, but yeah, so the first problem in my game, or challenge, let's call it, was definitely the language barrier. So my opponent was not so fluent in English, so that really took us a lot of time, checking rules because he couldn't explain the rules to me or anything like that. Like it, it was not there was not an easy way to kind of do things, especially like when he would ask what my Gits rules are and I have to explain it in English. Kind of it was a hard way to do it, and then we ultimately just started going through his coach um, to translate for us. So we basically had a translator at the table as well. Um, and so that took up a lot of our time to play the game. Ultimately, yeah, it was a frustrating game for me based on the terrain maps. The only place that I could put my scenery piece was immediately in the front, and then as you could expect, it got smashed. Um, so that was a little upsetting based on the terrain map. This of how it is, and then yeah, so going up against all of the Hearthguard was tough. The wards was tough, but I was doing what I was supposed to by just trying to systematically take out each hero one at a time to get rid of the wards, and just doing what you have to do in that job. Um, it was tough to do to keep my guys alive, but again, rally. This was one of the rare cases that rally really came in for me, and then fight on death was huge. So just slapping back every time he slapped me, and then also he had fight on death, so it was just back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then yeah, we actually ran out of time by I think the start of it was either the start of 3 or 4. I can't remember. It was or we did not get very far in the game, and then ultimately there was very brief mention of do we want to talk out the rest of the turns, and I said absolutely not. There's no way that we could figure out what would have happened in those amounts of rounds. It's just too much stuff to try and talk out, and a lot too many assumptions for my liking. And then at that point, totaling up grand strategies and everything like that, I had more points, so I took home the win, which ultimately they didn't mind because they were taking home the win overall for the two team pairings. So they were fine to just let it go. But yeah, that was definitely the most challenging game. Not so much in terms of difficulty, but external factors.
Yeah, I mean, we know that Belgium performs well, and this is technically Team Belgium only represents French-speaking Belgians, so the Flemish don't get to, well, they haven't traditionally been on this team, but they've been just super strong in general. Though last year at Worlds, I believe the Dutch ended up placing one position higher than the Belgians. But whenever they come to our tournaments, they seem to do really well. Or we play in the region. So I'm curious to see how this plays out for Worlds this year. And so, Nick, my last game to wrap this up was I asked for this game, actually. Was playing against Flesh Eaters, which you were literally, up to this moment, my only opponent that had ever played Flesh Eaters against. And I'd had so much practice with you that I went in kind of like, yep. I mean, I was telling him what his rules do and stuff. A little bit, but he was tired. This guy was ready. He was on one of the other Vufukota teams, and Fun Elite or Elite Fun, and I think he just did not want the matchup, was ready to go home. I don't even know if he was feeling that well. And then it was a bunch of, I took out his Terrorgeist in turn 1, and then, like, I think which ones are of the Flayers and Horrors? The Flayers are the ones that fly, right?
Yeah.
The Horrors ended up coming into combat with my Sentinels. There's like a unit of, not Sentinels, Wardens, 10 Wardens that ended up surviving against a constantly being brought back from the dead Horrors unit, Crypt Horrors unit, that just wouldn't die, and neither would mine. And it was just this stalemate in the middle of the table. And it was just one of those games that it was my least lovely game, not because the guy necessarily, but because it's just like I felt bad for walking all over him. So... it was an interesting way to end the tournament, but kind of cool that I went in with the spirit of Nick on my shoulder. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, looking at his build, it's already a tough one. And then against your army, yeah, you have to assume that the Terrorgeist is going to be dead almost immediately. So I'm curious why he was put up as or were you the attacker, or is he a
I
defender, or how
don't
did that?
I don't remember. I just know I said when I got the option, I was give me the Feck player.
Okay, yeah, that's odd that you would end up with him if it wasn't forced.
Yeah,
You're like one of the worst pairings you could get.
yeah, he didn't want to be there, but I mean,
Ah,
he was nice enough. All right, so moving on, just wrapping things up. Tournament results. We already talked about where we placed and how our teams did. I will throw a shout out to Peter Zoutgeest, who's one of our the guys in our community here. He runs he runs the Bloodstorm events, and his KO army, which is just fantastic. Not only did he end up placing well with the army, performing well, but he actually won the painting contest, and I think it's deserved. He does a really good job with the ships and stuff. I definitely voted for him. But I don't remember what the other armies were like. I don't. My impression was this tournament was less about painting and more about playing. Was that your takeaway?
yeah, yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
Not to say, I mean, Pater definitely that army looks great no matter where. I even said he's going to win just by like default that he brought that army, but it's not to take away from that. But this particular tournament, I just it seemed like a lot of people were less interested in the painting, myself included. I'm not a painter really. I rushed my
Sure.
army out. Um, were there any other tournament results or prizes that are worth mentioning, Nick?
No, we mentioned the placements already, so I unfortunately I wasn't able to actually get in the room. We were discussing with our team, just having a wrap up, and they did the pair or the award ceremony, but we couldn't actually get out because the room was blocked. So there was no space to go watch, so we were kind of stuck.
Yeah, I was in there. It was it was the normal fare of what you expect, and then Belgium won, so uh, they were pretty happy about that, as understandable. Um, what about future goals for either the team? If you want to share, again, we're kind of close to the cutoff point here of lists being due, so could be your future goals, how you feel about playing with Gits, all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm enjoying playing Gits. It's been a good learning experience. Also, it's even though the Meta Watch shows is breaking my heart with how high Feck is up there. It's been fun learning a new army and learning a new play style. It's drastically different than what I'm used to. As a team, yeah, we're training hard. We're having really good conversations throughout of we can improve and list sharing ideas. So we're not locked in. So we're still very flexible on what we can do. So soon enough we'll have to submit our list. But I mean, future goals is just to keep taking to lock down my list is the Gits or whichever one my team wants me to do, and kind of go that way and keep practicing up. I want to bring some fucking metal home after the Worlds tournament.
Yeah. Yeah, this was me playing Lumineth here was kind of like my. Not only did the Serbian team want me to give it a shot at least, but also this German team was really leaning towards me doing it. So I was like, you know what, screw it. It'll give me an excuse to paint it. Let's just see. Let's see what happens when I take a meta list. And even though it got a little nerfed by not only the recent points, of course, but even before with the spell portal not being in the list, I was proud of how it played out for me, though I wouldn't say like I choose not to play it against most of my friends here in the Netherlands unless they know they're up against it and they're like up for the challenge. Like Mitchell de Boer on your team, he wants to play against it, which makes sense. So
Right.
I'm happy to do that. But most of the time, people are like, I only do it once, and then I'm like, I'll never do that again to you again. So but it was good to see that, like, as you've heard a bunch of times, that my Johnny-ish nature might be a bigger element that's holding me back from getting these. Like the best I've ever done in a tournament before was like a 2-3, I think, at a
Right.
2-day tournament, and then I immediately jumped up to 4-1. And if I hadn't have gotten that Marathi matchup, I feel like a lot of the other matchups would have also been. I could have gone 5-0, which would have been insane.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was fun, and what was interesting about playing a list that I didn't necessarily want to play was that I wasn't really all that stressed about like how it played out. I was just kind of playing and like got to be a little bit more objective about everything, which I think might also help for the performance too. I don't know. Being a little less trying to pull off my tricks and just kind of like, well, this is the tool set that I have available to me. Let's just use it, you know?
Right.
I don't know if you feel that way with Gits at all, because I mean, obviously you kind of wrote your list, but you're also kind of using like the list. I don't know where you sit on the spectrum between those two things, but I know that you weren't exactly like doing it as a labor of love initially, at least. Do you feel like that has any kind of impact on how you perform with it?
No, I mean, so for me, I don't love it just aesthetically. Like, I hate the models. It's just not my style. I don't like the goofiness or the cartooniness to it. So I would say that's the only real downside for them. And then also I don't love how hard it is to keep hoppers upright.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, it's fine. I have a fun time playing them. It's a different, like I said, a different style than what I'm used to. Yeah, I don't really mind it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Lumineth channel, so I really wanted to make this tournament report, if only just to weigh in, because, like, I know people might think of me as the non-Lumineth host of the show, but, like, I have known the rules for quite a while, and then it wasn't hard for me to get used to playing this army. Like I said, my first game of the tournament was my third game ever with Lumineth. And so it feels good to be able to report back to the channel and say, like, hey, you know, like, I officially play Lumineth now. So, and if what I really want is for them to have a new, I'm waiting for that new battle tome whenever that comes out in 6 months, as always. But where they, it doesn't feel, where it feels a little more interesting to make lists. Right now, I feel like Lumineth is not exactly the most interesting to make lists for. But anyway, I'm probably playing KO with Serbia. I'm about to go to Serbia tomorrow. Wednesday actually. To start training with them, and I'm going to be playing about 8 games in 3.5 days. So it'll be almost as if it was a tournament. I plan on doing a video about that too. And I'll be taking KO with me to see how that plays. And if we end up deciding that, even though Lumineth just got nerfed a bit with the 80 extra points added to my list that I have to swap out other things for, if they want me to take Lumineth to the tournament, I'm happy to do it, because it is competitive and it's a strong ass list. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. But I definitely see myself playing more Lumineth at some point, just maybe only in a competitive sense for the time being. So
sure.
Any closing thoughts for us, Nick? What do you got on the horizon?
I believe we're doing is that Bruges next, right?
Oh yeah. So a week after Serbia, when we come back, when I come back, we'll be heading off to Bruges for a 1-day tournament. Are you bringing Gits for that too?
Most likely. I haven't decided yet, though.
Okay, so I didn't know you were on the fence, but yeah, and I'll be bringing KO for sure. And then you and I have a doubles tournament where we decided we're gonna just try to crush face. We're no secrets, no secrets yet, but we're decided we're just gonna crush face. So we'll see how it goes. And then after that, I've got a tournament in Harlem, but you won't. I think you'll be out of town that weekend.
Yes.
And then we have Worlds like a week later, so it's ramping up.
Sure is.
All right, so as always, you guys, thank you for listening. If you got this far in, and do all the good internet stuff, like, subscribe, share, all that. Comment in the Discord or on the comment section here. Nick and I'll be routinely updating you guys on our tournament experiences, and we're looking forward to sharing the ramp up to Worlds, which should prove to be an awesome time. Hopefully Jonas will end up coming to Amsterdam with some shirts, and we can do a little extra coverage. So thanks again, Nick, for being on the show. And until next time, guys, Ryan out.